Guest tonight says while Minneapolis may have seen a decline in murders, the city is doing so without any new laws that infringe upon the Second Amendment. Joining us now is David Kopel. He's research director of the Independence Institute, adjunct professor of advanced constitutional law at Denver University Stern College of Law. Good to have you with us, Professor. Let's start with first the idea that Minneapolis isn't infringing on the Second Amendment. Do you think that they've improved? By the way, we want to point out again, though, Minneapolis still has almost twice the murder rate as the national average.
Sure, but that's better than they used to be in the around 1996. And they made a lot of progress, first of all, which, as the president correctly said, a whole variety of programs to try to keep young people from joining gangs.
Right.
And some of those has been successful. And secondly, the state of Minnesota enacted one of the strongest right-to-carry laws in the nation in 2003. So that's an example of how you can have strong laws to protect gun rights, like the right-to-carry law, and you can have laws that take action to reduce crime without infringing Second Amendment rights.
And why is that so difficult for the left and those who are strong advocates of limiting Second Amendment rights? Why is it that so difficult for them to absorb? Because it is, as well as the outgoing Secretary of State, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton put it, we live in an empirically based world here. Those facts are on the table for all of us to assess.
I think for some in the left, that there is a moral opposition to citizen gun ownership, a culture war against the kind of people who they think own guns, and some of them are what I call pacifist aggressives. That is, people who have a personal pacifist morality for whatever reason, and they want to use the force and violence of government to make everybody else live that way.
I want to, if I may, share with the audience and you this full-screen quote of President Obama's remarks today, in which he said, "Weapons of war have no place on our streets or in our schools or threatening our law enforcement officers. Our law enforcement officers should never be outgunned on the streets." I don't believe that there is anyone in the country who would argue that way, that is against it. The fact is, when he talks, but he doesn't use the language of assault weapons. He talks about them as weapons of war, when in fact they are demonstrably not. These are semi-automatic rifles. Rifles, by the way, kill fewer people in the last year than have clubs and hammers, for crying out loud. But these realities escape the advocates who would seek to diminish our Second Amendment rights in this country.
Well, this whole weapons of war thing is a continuing fraud thought up by the gun ban lobbies a quarter century ago, and they keep on saying it. As you say, a self-loading firearm, a semi-automatic firearm, is just like every other normal firearm. You press the bullet once, press the trigger once, and one bullet comes out, just like all standard guns. The president is trying to deceive people into thinking that these are machine guns, military guns, which they're not. If criminals had machine guns, if anybody could buy a machine gun over the counter and the police didn't have machine guns, then the police truly would be out-armed and out-firepowered, but they're not. These are guns that are just like regular, they are regular guns, but to some people, they look like machine guns, and that's the whole source of the confusion and really the deliberate hoax.
And outrageously, to me at least, David, this president, when he says our law enforcement officers should never be outgunned on the streets, in community after community after community in this country, they are. But they're outgunned not by citizens. They're outgunned by drug cartels, gang members, and the citizen in this country seems to be an afterthought for this president, because just as he says no law enforcement officer should be outgunned, is he suggesting that citizens should be outgunned? I mean, this to me is preposterous reasoning and preposterous sophistry on the part of not only the president, but the gun control lobby itself.
Well, the police and civilians both carry the kinds of guns that the president wants to ban, and for the same reason, is because they're good for what the Supreme Court said is the core purpose of the Second Amendment, which is self-defense. If you see a police officer today He's probably got a semi-automatic handgun with a standard capacity magazine between 11 and 19 rounds. And in that officer's patrol car, you'll quite often find a AR-15 type rifle with a standard capacity magazine of 30 rounds. And the police officers chose those guns not because they're going hunting or because they're gun collectors, but because they're carrying them for the lawful protection of self and others. The same reason that civilians have under the Second Amendment right to own those firearms.
David Kopel, good to talk with you. Thank you for being here. Come back soon. David Kopel.